This is a cybersecurity awareness training for the employees of Covestic. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about information security and cybersecurity and different ideas. Through the next hour or so, we're going to take a look at how you interact with various things in regards to cybersecurity at work, at home, out in public. We're going to look at how we interact with our devices, our laptops, our smartphones, our tablets, maybe social media, what we do in a number of different areas. We just want to walk through these things and give you guys tips and trades that we can do to be more secure throughout the day. I want to start off this training by looking at a report from the Verizon Data Breach Incident Report of 2020 and just show you that over the course of time, what we thought is originally, the number one thing is hacking. That's still there, but notice how it's declined. And social media had some dips and plans, but it's really kind of second. The one that we're really kind of focusing on, though, is that third item down, error, and how that is actually increased and now represents almost 20% of all incidences and breaches. And this is really the internal error, internal struggles that we have as employees, and sometimes sending out a wrong file or misplacing something, communicating to your customers and having Outlook autocomplete to the wrong individual. That now represents almost 20% of all incidences and breaches. Well, as we begin today, I want to take a look and really think about this concept of personal data and what that really means. And we'll talk through a few minutes about where is our personal data and what all. But before we get started, we really need to think through this definition of privacy and security. And a lot of people will try and put them together or use them synonymously as they both mean the same thing. And they really, really don't. Privacy, think about privacy in terms of when we're posting something out to social media, who gets to see it? Is it just me? Is it me and my friends? Friends of my friends? Or the entire population, entire world? Who gets to see something when I post it? Likewise, if I have something, a device, who gets to have access on my device? Who gets to see it? Is it encrypted? Is it protected? That's all about privacy. Security, on the other hand, is about what are we doing to secure our accounts? Do we have a good, strong password? Do we have two-factor authentication turned on? What are some of our browsing habits? Do we connect and log into our accounts using public Wi-Fi? On our devices, do we have them password or PIN protected? Are they fully encrypted? What can we work through? And once we start to understand these differences between privacy and security, you'll also understand that they absolutely go together and they work in conjunction with each other and hopefully making us more secure. Well, have you ever thought about it? Where is your data? I mean, what do people really, really know about you? And as we think this through, there's a lot of items here, maybe your 401k or online stores, and think about what they know, and you would expect that. Or maybe your internet provider or the credit bureaus that are out there. Maybe even your insurance companies. Think about the data that they own from you, or your smartphone phone carriers. What do they know about you? But then I see one item here, grocery store, and I'm like, wait a second. That just doesn't seem to fit the list. It doesn't fit with all the other items here. Well, I live in Rochester, New York, and Rochester, New York is the home of one of the biggest and fastest grocery store chains in the U.S. at the moment, Wegmans. And going to Wegmans in Rochester is an experience. I have an office mate who takes his wife to Wegmans for a dinner date. Wegmans is awesome, and they have their Shoppers Club card, and they have the card, and that's really, really great. You're able to get discounts on items and what other things. But think about that information that they're gathering about you. My wife regularly gets emails saying, "We know you regularly buy this item. We're sorry, we're going to discontinue it. Here are 6 other items just like it." I use Wegmans as my pharmacy. I get text messages from my pharmacy. It's time for you to renew your prescription. Just reply yes to renew. That's awesome. I don't ever have to think about my prescription, and I start to look at it and say, oh, maybe it's getting low, and then I automatically get that text. That's really awesome. But take it to the next level. When I walk into Wegmans, I can look up and I can see my face on a camera as I walk in the door, and I know that that's being recorded. And I'm just waiting for that day that I get that text message from Wegmans saying, here's your grocery list. Now, some of us are thinking that might be pretty cool. That's also starting to go into that kind of uncomfortable zone, that creepy land that I like to refer to it as. They're really starting to overstep in about what they know and what they can do for us. So, but how do we protect against that? What can we do? And I wish I could tell you that if you just did this one thing, if you just perfected this one area, you would be able to be all secure. And it just doesn't work that way. At Covestic, we have a number of different things that we have. There we have some firewalls, we have internet policies, we have an acceptable use policy, password parameters, and all of these are different layers to help protect you and to protect Covestic. Your customers have the similar things. For you personally, it's all about different layers. Again, how strong are you using your passwords? Do you use unique passwords? Do you use two-factor authentication? What are some of your browsing habits? Do you connect to free Wi-Fi? All of these things put together will create the layers and help you be more secure. A couple of quick examples as we get started this afternoon. One of the things is, how easy is it to be tracked? Well, Seattle, Washington, University of Seattle, Washington created a mobile app, and they were able to get it on to a person's phone, and through that app, using the GPS tracking, they were able to identify where the person lived, where they worked, what was the route that they took to get to work, which Starbucks that they like to stop at to, and start to actually predict several of their regular daily and weekly habits. And you're like, that's really, really scary. Well, I actually have a couple of different apps on my phone. And one of them is the Life 360 app. And Life 360 is really, really good because it enables, as I travel for a living, it enables my wife and my family to know where I am. Well, not too long ago, I added my 12-year-old, got a smartphone, and I added her to that. And school is just getting ready to start, and she starts right off, and I'm text her, hey, how was school? She says, great. And she says, why are you driving at 80 miles an hour by a Walmart in the town that I was in at the moment? And I'm like, how do you know this? And she says, I'm tracking you on the app. Again, while this is a good thing, it's also a scary, scary event. What about all the Internet of Things and the stuff at home? What does that really mean? What's that level of risk on there? Well, according to the headline, Roomba, those nice vacuums that, we set them off when we go to work and you come back and your house is all beautiful and clean. Well, as that Roomba was going around, kind of bumping into the walls and into furniture and kind of turning and moving around things, it's actually mapping out your floor plan. Well, what's the big deal about that? Well, it was sending that information back to the company that makes Roomba vacuums, and they were selling their floor plans. They were selling your floor plans out to the highest bidder. That becomes a problem. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Internet of Things and just some things to be careful about. Well, what are some signs as you're thinking about this and with all of this data? What are some signs that you might have a compromise, that maybe an account's been compromised or a device has been compromised? And the very first thing that the indicator that you may have been compromised is you're starting to see new accounts opened in your name. And this could be credit cards, this could be a number of things. It could also be on social media. And this has been absolutely a huge issue with Facebook. Facebook is always coming out and saying, removing hundreds of thousands of fake accounts. And have you ever gotten that request? Will you be my friend? And you start to look at it and it's you with your picture and, account with your name on it. New accounts are always being opened in your names. Well, another sign is, especially on a device, is that your software you might have additional software on there, a new app on your phone, something that you didn't install and it just kind of showed up. Or your passwords aren't working. And I'm not talking about the, come back on Monday and I just can't remember what my password is. I'm talking about when I've slowed down and I'm punching one key at a time and it still doesn't work to get me in. I might get some more pop-ups than usual, or my device is running slower than usual. And these are both kind of you have to say it kind of on a comparison cycle, because we know that we all get a lot of pop-ups, or our devices seem like they run slow on occasion. But if this is substantially worse, it might be an indication of compromise. You log into your account. Maybe you finally get into your account and you go to your profile tab and your address has been changed, or maybe one of those challenge response questions has been changed, or something's been changed and you're not sure why. How about if you get that request, you're busy doing an afternoon project, or you're working on something, and all of a sudden your phone goes off and it says, please validate your Facebook login with a two-factor. And you're like, wait a second, I'm not even logging into Facebook right now. Why should I be getting that two-factor request to validate? Maybe you're seeing those unwanted plugins in your web browser, and I like to refer to them as little mini apps. They're up in the upper right-hand corner of your web browser, and if you're starting to see, again, items there that you have not installed, that Covestic has not installed, your customers haven't installed, it might be a sign of a compromised device. But what do we do about it? If we have a device that's been compromised, or we've been compromised, what do we do? The first thing is, make sure you're scanning for malware. If we might have clicked on something and we want to install malware, make sure you scan that device for malware. Next, you'll want to change that password immediately. And before you start throwing stones at me, if we do it right, we're talking about one password. We're not talking about changing 227 passwords. We're talking about just doing one. It may be you want to disconnect it from the internet. A lot of the ways that malware spreads is once it gets installed to your device, it starts to spread to other devices that are connected on your network, whether it's company, at home, what have you. And it may be bad for your device, but by removing that from the network, from the internet, you're preventing that spread to other devices. Do you guys get those alerts from your credit cards or from your banks? Hey, major purchase in Seattle, Washington. Well, I live in Rochester, New York. I'm not anywhere near Seattle, Washington. Why would I be making that purchase? Or this purchase is over a certain dollar limit. Have those fraud alerts set up on your phone. You also want to set up for the credit and fraud monitoring. Every time there's an event that happens, typically around a credit card breach, a lot of companies will offer free year of credit and fraud monitoring. Have that set up. Are you checking your credit reports on a regular basis? And with that, you really want to consider putting a freeze on at all three of the credit bureaus for your credit, okay? Freeze your credit at all three of the credit bureaus. And this is Equifax, Experian, and Transamerica. You want to do that across all three. It's fairly simple now. You have to create an account, go through and set it up to freeze. This is now free for all 50 states across the board. You can unfreeze at any point. You just need to be able to log in and say, I want to unfreeze, say I'm going to go purchase a new washer and dryer or something as we're going through this, and I'm going to apply for their line of credit. Before you leave, you log in, set it to unfreeze, and you only have to do it at one of them. Unfreeze for a period of time, 24, 48 hours, and then you go, you make your purchase, and you come home, and it'll automatically go back to being frozen, and it remains that way. It used to be expired after 12 months. Now it's still there after it doesn't ever expire. And you also want to think about this for your kids. Criminals really like to get the social security numbers of 4 or 5-year-olds. One of the things, maybe back to thinking about a device, and I get something on my device, it may be necessary to complete a full system reboot. Now, before you do this, you want to check with your IT group or check with your customer's IT group, because by rebooting, that may remove some of the logs, but it may also restore it back to a normal operation. And finally, check and see if you've been impacted by a website. It's Have I Been Pwned, P-W-N-E-D. And this is a great website. It's what it is 2 different lists. One is a list of every email that's ever been impacted at all by any incident or breach which is out there. So it's about 5 trillion records or so. And then the other tab is all of the passwords that have been released, and again, part of an impacted or in a breach. Just check your email. Probably if you've had an email for about 6 to 7 months, it's on the list. But the big side is your password. And when you enter the password, it does not capture that. It just matches it. Does this match to something that's on the list? And if you see that it's on the list, you want to change it and never, ever reuse it. We're going to talk about that in a little bit later. All right. Well, let's talk about how do we stay secure here at work? Can we be secure both at Covestic and at our customer locations? And the first thing is to understand that security is everybody's responsibility. It's not just IT's job, or it's not just the security department at your customer. It's everybody's job. You guys are going to be the ones getting that email. You may get a phone call or a text message. It's your responsibility in protecting the organization. Well, antivirus, and I always get, man, why are we talking about antivirus? Antivirus is so old. That's like so 1900s and 1980s. Why are we still talking about this? Well, because it still works. It still works about 60 to 70% of the time, and they're catching it. And most of the antivirus solutions now are also anti-malware, and they are actually much more behavioral based versus the old data signature based type of thing. So they're actually looking at what's the behavior of this document, what's the behavior of this application going to do. We want to keep it on and always use it. Keep it up to date. Make sure you're getting those updates on a regular basis. Run those scans on a weekly basis. Run the scans on a regular basis. Don't turn it off. You want to keep it and keep it using it. And while this is the stay safe at work section, I really want to mention that you really need to think about having antivirus, anti-malware on your personal devices as well. Okay? Go out, find a solution that works for you. And when I say 60 to 70%, please don't think if I grab Norton, that's 60%, and I grab McAfee, that's 60%, that's 120%, I'm all protected. What Norton's going to do is it's going to find McAfee and call it a virus. McAfee's going to find Norton, call it a virus. They will cancel it out and not be protected. The other thing that's important to mention here is I almost always hear, well, I'm a Mac user or I'm an Apple user and I'm immune. We don't get viruses and malware. That's actually not true. We're seeing a lot more of the malware being written for the iOS ecosystem. And what's happened is Windows was just too easy of a target. We are seeing that more and more consistently. Please go out, do your research, find a product that you are comfortable with, and have that installed on all of your devices. Well, what about physical security? The very first thing is that if you see something, say something, and please do it immediately. I have the attention span of a gnat. I can walk in the morning and maybe I see something that's not quite right. I might see a package or something by the door that just doesn't look right. But then I go in and I sit down at my desk and I open up my email and I go through my 200 emails that came in overnight and I go grab a cup of coffee, and on the way back, I'm going to stop and I'm going to talk to one of my cube mates about what their plans are for the weekend, or maybe their travel plans or vacation plans. And then I go throughout my day and I have my meetings and I have completely forgotten it. If you see something, say something and do it immediately. What are some other good things to be thinking about? Well, the first thing is you want to lock your workstation. And the rule of thumb that I have is if you can't see your screen, lock it. If I'm getting up just to run to get a cup of coffee, lock it. If I'm running to the printer or to the restroom, maybe I'm headed off to a meeting, lock your workstation. And for the biggest reason is, quite simply, what you're working on is not need to know for everybody else. And that's part of that error thing that I was talking about at the beginning of the training. Okay? Unauthorized access, unintentional access. If we're leaving our screens open and as we walk away and unprotected, that is unauthorized access. You want to make sure that you take care of your your mobile devices and not just leave them hanging around. Do you lock your desk drawers or offices in your facilities? Do they have a door? Can you secure those appropriately? Because that goes right into that next point of securing and how we handle our paper. You're like, this is all cybersecurity training. Yeah, but we still deal with paper. We need to be careful and conscious of how we are both utilizing our paper and how we are disposing of that paper. Make sure you take care of your keys. And I like to include in this one badges as well. Most of you will be wearing a badge, especially if you're at a customer site, identifying that you are a Covestic employee, that you're there for a reason. And that's awesome. But when you leave and you go home, take it off, put it in your backpack, put it in your purse, your carry bag, whatever you need to do, but protect that badge. What criminals are doing is they know that you're going to leave there and head to the grocery store. You're going to head to Starbucks. You're going to head to someplace, and they're waiting for you. And they're waiting to take a picture of that badge, insert their own particular photo, and then the next day walk in like they belong there. And that drives really to the last 2 points, preventing shoulder surfing. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, and then preventing tailgating and piggybacking. And that's just really thinking about it and being aware. And the tailgating, the best example I can think of is thinking about all those shows on TV where the guy walks in, he's carrying 2 trays of coffee, and he said, "Oh, okay, can you hold the door for me?" And he walks right in, and again, acts like he belongs there and walks there. You got to be very, very careful of that. Well, this is a group community workspace area. It might be in a conference room, community workspace area, and you just happen to walk in, and this is what we find. And there should be several items that should be jumping right out to you as in major concerns if you walk by this area with nobody around. Some of them include the tax form. You know, think about that information that's on tax form: social security numbers, addresses, personal information. The financial plan, it could have an account number. It might have a retirement, banking, routing numbers. That invoice, ship to addresses, account numbers, billing information. We have an open laptop. What kind of information is on that laptop? Again, unauthorized that level of access. We have work files and notes. We have a phone. Is that phone protected at all? Does it have a password on it? And almost always, somebody says, "Well, what about the coffee cup?" And yes, the coffee cup is absolutely risky, but we're talking about what are those items that we would be concerned about. And think about it too as you're working around your customer locations. One of the things I see quite often is whiteboards and just the amount of information that's left in group meeting rooms with whiteboards and just that information that's there. Well, this is one of my more favorite topics during this type of thing, and I will have to admit, I am an absolute password nerd. I get excited about these things, but passwords to me are fun. And as we start off, I want you guys to think back to about early January of 2018. And you're like, why we gotta go back there? That's kind of like a distant memory for me at this point. Well, about that point, North Korea was performing a lot of missile testing. And at one point or so, we were actually getting pretty concerned that North Korea could reach the United States, Hawaii in particular. So Hawaii was trying to do their appropriate testing, and they were developing a communication plan to send out text notices to all of the people in Hawaii. And what happened? Well, we're kind of, the cobwebs are clearing now. We know the story that they sent out that message, but it went out on the live production message. It didn't come out and say that this was a test. What it said was, hey, the missiles are coming. You need to take immediate precautions. Find a place, be safe. But the missiles are on their way. Well, you have a PR nightmare. So what do? We take somebody who looks somewhat official. We put them in front of a bank of open computers, and with their badge on, and put them on national television. Now, I've already got some issues with that already, but we're out on national television and we're trying to calm down our concerns. Okay, well, here's my big problem. And let me actually blow that up for you. And I apologize, it is kind of fuzzy, but it says password, warning point 2. Now, I don't know if this is the password for their actual warning system, whatever. It's not even a really good password, but as a whole, it's posted, and this got published on national television. Well, I mentioned I'm a nerd about passwords, and I like to follow what are the true list of bad passwords. And this is the list from 2018, so ending the year 2018, the list of the most used bad passwords, okay? And you see the first one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's unchanged from 2017. And then number 2 is password. And password's actually been the number 1 bad password for almost 30 years. It's only been in the last couple of years that it's actually fallen to number 2. The 2019 list is also out, and that it didn't change much from that. Other things that show up on the bad password list: typically sports names. So whether it's whoever just won the Super Bowl or whoever won the World Series or the basketball championships, that team name will largely be on the list the following year. Okay? I live in Rochester, New York. That's fairly close to Buffalo. I got to tell you, the Bills have never made the list. Buffalo is not on the list. Other areas that are always see a lot of names, a lot of pet names. Number 21 is Charlie. Number 23, Donald. And I just kind of like to let that one sit for a minute. That showed up in 2018 as a brand new bad password. So you need to be very, very careful with the passwords that we use. And with that, I want to have a short quiz. Can you identify the strongest password that is out there? Is it A, LHW49K $? Is it B, eat all the pizza, 1 exclamation mark? Is it password with an @ sign and a couple of capital S's? Or is it D, none of the above? Well, what'd you pick? Did you pick A? And I always like to do this if I'm doing this in person. I like to ask, why did you pick A? And invariably somebody will say, well, it's the same, it's got everything in there. It's all randomized. It's upper, it's lowercase, it's got numbers, it's got special characters. And that's absolutely true. And that's exactly what we've taught for the last 30 years, that we had to be random and did this. And here's my problem. What's the very first thing that we do with password A when you set that? You typically write it down, because not only is it have to be all randomized, but we've trained people to then have to change it every 90 days, and we can't remember that. So we write it down. Did anybody choose password C? I hope not, because password has been the #1 password, now #2 password for so long. Password C can actually be broken and cracked in inside of a minute. Usually it's less than a few seconds. Those of you that chose password B, and password B is the correct answer in this case, the reason is simply based on the length, okay? Password A has 8 characters in it. That can actually be cracked today using brute force, okay? There's going to be 2 ways that criminals get your password. One is through social engineering. We're just going to ask you. That's the most popular way. In likelihood, you're going to give it to them. Or through brute force. We can get a hold of that master password file, that salted hash, and then try and crack through the encrypted passwords. On an 8-character password, it is now less than 1 week in terms of computing power and time to do it. As I mentioned, password C, it's under a minute because there's been so many people using password C. Password B, based on the length, and right now the magic number is about 12, is over 200 to 500 years, depending on the computing power. Every additional character that you add is exponentially the more computing power it takes. Computing power and time to do it. So password B is somewhere between 200 and 500 years to take to crack it. So let's talk about, how do we create good passwords? What are some of the ways that we create good passwords? And one of the things we want to do is we want to create what we call a passphrase, okay? And one of the ways I tend to think about it is, I'm a pretty visual person, okay? And if I can remember my favorite place or remember someplace around, then that will help me remember my passphrase. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to pick 3 random words. And because I'm so visual, I'm going to pick window, desk, fireplace. Now, these might be my living room. It may also be in my favorite Starbucks or hotel travel lobby, okay? But we're going to use window, desk, fireplace. And then I'm going to remove some spaces, substitute with some underscores. Add maybe the name of my website that I want to go to. In this case, it's going to be Netflix. And then substitute some special characters. And now I have a sufficiently long password that I can utilize, and is complex. It meets all the complexity requirements that I can utilize for this. Do I take this and apply this to other websites? That's unique to Netflix, possibly, or I can come up with some different items, okay? this is where we want to think about in terms of creating a good, strong password. So some other things to remember. Please don't reuse your password. Currently, according to BitGlass, it's about 60%, 59% of people use the same password at Covestic as you do on social media, for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, as you do on your personal email accounts, as you do on your streaming for Hulu, for Netflix, for Amazon, all the way across the board. We reuse the same password. Do you guys remember back in November 11th? Disney Plus just launched, and within hours, over 1,000 accounts were hacked. Why? Well, criminals, remember they had bought those email and password combinations that had been exposed in previous breaches. All they did was they started using those same combinations and were getting into more than 1,000 accounts on Disney Plus. It was not Disney Plus that got hacked. It was individual accounts that had reused the same password that was being continuously used in a known breach. Please keep them confidential. Don't write them down. Don't share them with others. Your IT group does not need to know what your password is. Your bank does not need to know what your password is. Your doctor's office does not need to know what your password is. They will not ask you what your password is. They'll ask a lot of other information, but they will not ask you what your password is. Longer is stronger, okay? 12 characters, think about the use of that passphrase. And please don't put any personal information in your password. And this includes kids' names, birth dates, pets' names. Almost all of that information is readily available. A couple of quick searches, and we're able to get that. And wherever possible, please have two-factor authentication turned on, or multi-factor authentication. And this is something that you know, that would be your password, something that you have. Can you get a text? Can you get a phone call, an email, a push notification, an app? All of these items, maybe it's a 6-digit code that you can do, something that you have, and then finally, something that you are. Biometrics, your fingerprint, your retinal scan, facial scans. When you can combine two of those together, you are significantly reducing the amount and the ability of a criminal breaking into your account. It's not yet impossible, but it is significantly reduced. And another real quick thing to add, I mentioned those security response questions. You know, what street did you grow up on? What was your school? What was your mother's maiden name? Your first pet? What kind of car did you drive? Best friend's name? All of these different things, these security response questions. One, that's not two-factor. It's two things that you know, your password and then the answer to the question. The second thing is, most often, again, it's very readily available on social media. Think about those items that we've shared on social media, okay? One of the big things that we're seeing right now as we go through is filling out these questionnaires. What was your favorite song and some of this other stuff? And to be honest with you, my LinkedIn feed is full of the same questions with do not respond to these. You're giving out personal information. Okay, you have to be very, very careful about that. And usually at this point, somebody says to me, well, I don't answer those questions honestly. Guys, I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. How am I supposed to answer and remember what I answered to these security response questions to get it quite right? I just can't do that. Be careful with it and just know that that's not really a two-factor solution. Well, what about emails? And emails is still absolutely the most popular way to gain and gather information and to really just start a hack. 90% of all hacks start with a phishing email. And there's several things that we can look at in terms of phishing emails. And there's three major things that if you look at it will help you spot that. The first, they're from somebody pretending who they're not. There's somebody pretending to be somebody that they are not, okay? This particular example looks like it comes from a person named Mike Denz. Mike Denz is the CEO of Gray Castle Security. It looks like it's coming from the CEO. It's really not. Notice it's Office CEO 007 at AOL.com. Now that's not even his personal email account, but that's just somebody having fun. Office CEO 007 at AOL.com. Again, I'm a little bit of a nerd, but that is where it is. So it's going to, one, come from somebody pretending to be something they're not. Two, it's going to create a sense of urgency. Notice, urgent request with not one, but two exclamation marks. So it's creating that sense of urgency. And three, it's going to give you a call to action. They want to get you to do something, and they want you to do it now. Let me know when you're available. There's something I need you to do. I'm going into a meeting right now with limited phone calls. Just reply back to my email. And you're like, wait a second, there's no link, there's no attachment. How is this a phishing email? This is absolutely a phishing email, and it is not only a phishing email, but it is the most popular phishing email out there. There's not been a single company that I have talked to in over 2.5 years that has not received this. And I've even confirmed that it has been also available at Covestic. Okay, we have received it there. This is a phishing email because who doesn't want to help the boss? Okay, you reply back, sure, what can I do to help you? Well, we wanted to reward Covestic employees. They're doing such a great job. We just landed this major account. Can you go out and buy some iTunes gift cards? Absolutely. How many? Well, let's go for 100 iTunes gift cards or 10 $100 gift cards. That's $1,000. And it comes back and say, okay, I purchased them. And what's the numbers? I want to make sure that they're activated. That's money gone out the door. And I've seen this at literally every organization I have worked with. One other interesting note on this is I did mention Mike Denz is the CEO. This email was sent out on March 8th, 2019. Mike Denz became the CEO at Grey Castle on January 1st. That's not even a full, it's what, 68 days, not even quite 70 days. And they're already figured it out and are sending this email. We need to be very, very careful in looking at it. Here's another one that we're seeing. And again, I started seeing this one in higher ed and colleges and stuff. And now I've seen it all the way across. And this is very long and wordy. In a sense, is basically, I've already installed malware on your machine. I've been tracking where you've been going on the internet. And I've got enabled your camera. So I've got it side by side with a video of you doing this. And if you don't pay me a certain amount of money, in this case, $869, I'm going to send a copy of where you've been to your boss and all of your peers, okay? Flat out, it's simple. It's trying to play on the fear of, I know where you've been on the internet, what kind of searches you're doing, and it's extortion. That's all it is. We're seeing a little bit of a variant of this one, and again, I've confirmed that this email has also been received at Covestic, and that is that it'll start out with hello, and here are some of your previous passwords, and I have to tell you, they will be real. You will look at that and you will see and recognize one of your previously exposed passwords. And when that happens, it's going to scare you. And now they're going to play on fear, and then from the rest, it's the same email. It's extortion. Here's another one, and I like to include this one because sometimes it's more about knowing what's real versus what's not. And you look at this email, and man, this looks like a good notification from Apple. It's got the Apple logo and the YouTube, and this one looks real, and you'd have a hard time figuring it out unless you understood what a real Apple receipt looks like, okay? And a real Apple receipt will always have a description of what was purchased, a payment method, bill to address, and various details. This is such a big deal that Apple actually has an FAQ about what their receipts look like on their website, okay? And this, you gotta think about it like a Secret Service. They spend time learning what a real dollar bill looks like, what a real $100 bill looks like, so that when they see a fake, it now jumps out and is completely understanding that that is scary. And by the way, who's gonna pay $145 for YouTube TV per month? All right, some things to think about with our phishing emails is don't be clicking on any attachments or links in an email unless we first validate that sender's information. Is that really the true sender? Information, grammar, the time it was sent. I work with somebody. They only send emails at 12:30 at night. If I get an email from them at 2 in the afternoon, I start to get suspicious. Whereas other people, I get emails all day long. If I get emails from them at 12:30 at night, that's something out of the norm. It's suspicious. And when in doubt, call or text that person who sent you that mail. Validate it through another mechanism. Remember that first email? Headed into a meeting. Just reply back. Don't send or save sensitive data in your emails. This becomes a problem if there is a breach and let's say something, your email gets compromised. criminals can now go through this, and this becomes a really big issue in terms of if you have sensitive or personal identifiable client information in your email, it becomes now forensic evidence. It becomes a reportable event. You want to keep clear out your emails on a periodic basis, exactly what we just talked about, and make sure we're securing all of them with two-factor authentication. And that goes for your personal email as well, because security is everybody's responsibility. Well, what about our browsing things? What should we be concerned with about our browsing? And the very first thing is, please, I know that Edge, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, all of them, they ask, do you want, when you log into a site, do you want me to remember that? And we've got to be very, very careful about that. Please avoid doing that. Those are not password managers. They are not encrypted. On Chrome, your password manager is your Google Gmail password. Do you want to put that up against a criminal? And others aren't even encrypted or they're saved in clear text. We want to be very careful about storing your passwords in your browser. Make sure you're using only trusted, recognized websites. Go to the site, type it in. Don't just click on it. And you got to be very careful about making sure you're at the correct site. If you get that link in and, hey, you're getting a new Amazon gift card, you know what? I log into Amazon and then copy the number, and I don't just click on the link in the email, or your Netflix account's been suspended. Again, I'm logging into Netflix and going to my account profile versus clicking on the link in the email. And I only get my software from trusted sources. I stick to I'm an Android user. I stick to the Google Play Shop, or maybe it's like my tax software. I get my TurboTax software from Intuit.com, the maker of TurboTax. I don't get it from another source. You want to keep your browsers and your PCs up to date. Again, we're constantly patching vulnerabilities. And if I'm off-site, I'm connecting using a VPN to connect back in, whether it's to Covestic or into my customer sites. I'm wanting to use that VPN so that it creates that encrypted connection back and forth. And lastly, you can't just rely on the HTTPS. I mean, that's one of the things we've talked about for 30 years is we want to have that padlock. Look for that padlock. Well, criminals are using it too. This looks like Dropbox, okay? It looks pretty good. You sign in with your Gmail account, but then take a notice at it. It's got the padlock, but queen-margaret.000webhostapp.com/Dropbox, that's not really Dropbox. That is 000webhost.app. You want to find that first backslash to the left and then go to the immediate left. That's where you really are. This is not a Dropbox. And why is this so bad? Because they're assuming they're using the same password as you would at Covestic. Well, what about privacy? We mentioned personal privacy at the beginning of this talk. Well, we need to be thinking about our client and our customer privacy. What kind of work do they do? The United States defines personal data as any information about an individual maintained by an agency, including information that can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity, such as name, social security number, date, place of birth, mother's maiden name, biometrics, and other information that is linked or linkable to an individual, such as medical, educational, financial, employment information. That's according to the NIST standards of 800-122. I would love to be able to give you a better definition, but every state wants to define it differently. And I have a note here. This doesn't really qualify for GDPR. So for those customers of Covestic that you're working on that deal with international, you may need to think about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. And that defines it as personal data is defined by the EU, the European Union, as any information related to an identified or identifiable natural person, data subject, and that goes on to decide who can be identified directly or indirectly. In particular, reference to an identifier such as a name, an ID number, location data, online identifier, including the IP address, or to one or more factors specific to the physical, physiological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, social identity. And this, huge note, includes photos and social media posts. And that's based off of reference article 4 of the GDPR regulations. And why is that so important? What is that really, why is that such a big deal? Well, we're on site, we're working at our customers' locations. Is our customer a data processor or a data controller? There are different reporting requirements depending on if they're a processor or controller. And some things to just remember here. Please don't transmit or store personal data. And this would be your customers or your clients' customer personal data, okay, except using what they say is approved software or devices. And personal data can only be retained. One of the big things is, especially in GDPR, it's only to be retained for as long as necessary. So if I'm doing a project, fine, but as soon as I'm done with the project, I got to get rid of it. And we want to make sure we're using full encryption for all personal data, both in transit and at rest. This is absolutely huge. A lot of this is in regards to compliance with certain laws, including GDPR, CCPA for California, and many others. Some other things just to remember: do you know where your internal or customer security policies are stored? Have you gone through those and read through those? Know what those requirements are for your customers. Do you understand the consequences of noncompliance? They can be some pretty steep fines. Okay, and remember to review those policies on a regular basis. So what do we do if we have any questions or concerns? How do we escalate some things? Well, we want to report any of our cybersecurity related questions or concerns immediately. And if we're on a client side, if we're on at a customer's account, we want to talk to our SDM or our account manager. That's how we do it. Maybe we're reporting it up through our client's help desk. Follow those policies. If you're internal at a Covestic, please send the service desk and the email address there, because security is everybody's responsibility. Wow, we made it through the day. We're headed home. I can take off my security hat. I don't have to think about it anymore, right? Well, wrong. We're now all in this time of COVID, in time of pandemic, we're now working from home. We need to be thinking about our personal Wi-Fi networks. What are some of the things we need to be thinking about? Well, definitely change that default username and password. Do you know that most routers for the longest time, the default username and password were admin? Do you still have that? You want to have a level of security. Please put a password on there. Have some level of security on there. Currently, the standard is still WPA2. That's the highest level. There are signs that WPA3 is starting to come out, but you have some level out there. You might want to think about MAC addressing. That's an extra type of thing. Do you have teenagers? Do you have kids? I have 3 teenagers in my house. I have parental controls set up, blocking some sites. I knock them off the internet at night. Some different ideas. Think about parental controls. When you go to get all your devices connected, do you still want to broadcast that SSID, that name when it says, here are the wireless connections available? Are you broadcasting that name out so that others can see it? You want to change the name of that network. A lot of times the default name is the model of your router, a Cisco 6500. Well, if I see, a Cisco 6500 is available for me to connect, and what's the chances I haven't changed the default username in there if I'm not changing the name of that network? You might want to hide it. Has your router been updated? Are you keeping that up to date in terms of where its software is, its firmware? And think about maybe a secondary network. I mentioned I have teenagers. My teenagers have friends. They come to our house. They want to get onto my Wi-Fi. That's great. I just don't want them where I'm saving my files, my personal files. I have a secondary network set up for them for guests coming in. Well, what about all of those Internet of Things, those smart devices? I mean, we talked about the vacuums, and we've got the lights and the Ring doorbells and the thermostats and just all of these devices. Well, they're kind of cool. I mean, they're awesome, and Alexa and just all what we can do with that. That's really kind of a cool thing. We just need to think about what it is. Understand, most of these items want to talk back to home. They want the phone home. They want to have that internet connection. What about our cars? And this is a story from a few years ago, but came out in 2015. There was a couple of hackers, and they had hacked a Jeep Cherokee. And while the guy was driving down the road, and this was a known test, he knew it was going to happen, they hacked into it through the entertainment system, okay, through the radio, and they started the windshield wipers going and turned on the heat and the fan, and that was kind of cool until they disabled the brakes. And they did that while the guy was going down the highway at 75 miles an hour and driving it down the highway. That's scary. We want to be thinking about that. Just be careful with some of that stuff. And remember, also, if it's a rental car, man, loading in, you get in and you want to go hands-free, so you connect your phone, that automatically loads your contact list. I mentioned I travel a lot for a living. I like to get into most rental cars, and I just say, call mom. I don't ever know where it's going, but I like to see what, where it comes out. So what are some things to think about? Well, when it comes to security on the Internet of Things, not all devices are created equally. Matter of fact, most of them aren't created with security involved. They're created to solve another problem. You want to be careful with that. Be careful when purchased previously owned. Has it been wiped? Has it been taken back to factory settings, or does it still have information from the previous owner? Change the username and password. And this is so critical that California actually created a law for manufacturers of Internet of Things devices that they have to have the ability to change the username and password. Additionally, Nest thermostats, when you go out and you create your username, they actually bounce it up against Have I Been Pwned, and they won't let you set a password if it matches something on that list. That's one of those that's actually doing it right. Can it still be updated? For me, my Xbox, and again, my kids don't like me very much, my Xbox is not on the internet at all, okay? But I start to think about some of the other things that I have, and they just need an interconnect connection. They don't need to. My Ring doorbell does not need to be connected on my personal network. I put them on my guest network, okay? It's a separate from where I'm sharing my files. And you might have to just ask if that technology is worth it. We're seeing more and more with like Alexa's taking over and Google Home and some of these other automated intelligence. And you know what? I'm not there yet. I don't talk to Alexa to turn the timer on when I'm baking something or to play music. I actually have a radio. I still turn it on and off manually. For me, that technology is not worth the risk. But I have to. That's me. You guys have to make your own decision. Is that technology worth the risk? And backups, guys. I know that we're doing backups at work, and it's really, depending on your customer and where your customer, and they're providing it, and Covestic's doing that, and do this. This is really, think about your own personal data. And, I'm looking at my phone right now, and I've got about 3,500, almost 4,000 pictures on my phone. Is that backed up? We want to be very careful about that. And, we're entering graduation season, and my sister a couple of years ago, she called me. She was absolutely in tears calling me because she's trying to develop, the slideshow, the mandatory slideshows we do our graduation parties and whatever. In tears, she had gotten a Microsoft update, and they gave her the blue screen of death. I was able to go through, and I was able to start helping her recover on these items. And what I found is she had over 19,000 pictures over a period of 11 years and had never done the backup. We had a very long discussion about that. She now has a backup thing. It's a USB drive. That's all she needed to do to think about, but she has a backup of her photos now. Do you have that for your own devices? Okay. And just think through that. What about when we're out in public? What some things should we be concerned about in public? Well, the first thing is, we got a quick video.
At this resort in Cancun, guests are on their phones. What they don't know, there's a hacker here using a new trick. He's creating a fake Wi-Fi network, but making it look like the real one from the hotel.
So we're at the resort right now, and their Wi-Fi access point is Fiesta Rewards. We set up Fiesta Rewards Pool, which basically makes people think, hey, we're at the pool. It must be a stronger signal down here. I'll use that one.
When you log in, hackers can spy on your every move and steal all your personal information. And we watch guest after guest connect to our fake network, thinking it's the real thing.
You can see right now there's someone named Sharon, there's someone named Cody. They both have iPhones.
And you're watching what they do.
We can monitor everything they're doing right now.
I'm gonna go try to find them.
Good luck.
The hotel is in on it, but no one else is. Is there a Sharon here? You're Sharon?
Yes.
What Wi-Fi are you on?
I'm on Fiesta Rewards Pool.
Okay, that's the hotel Wi-Fi?
Yes.
What if I told you that's actually not the hotel Wi-Fi? And our security expert can monitor everything you're doing right now on your phone.
It frightens me. Why would you want someone to know your personal information?
Even down on the beach, people are logging in. Cody?
Yeah.
There it is. Fiesta Rewards Pool.
It's pretty unsettling being on vacation, so that's pretty scary.
But what information can the hacker really get? I tested out.
I'm watching everything he's doing in real time.
Gonna buy some gloves for when I get back home to the cold.
And he just entered in his Visa information. So it's his Visa card number.
And I'm gonna log into my email.
He just logged in. There's his email address. And there's his password.
So how do you protect yourself? Use your cell carrier's 3G or 4G when banking or shopping. It's more secure. Plus, ask the hotel for the name of its Wi-Fi and be sure to shut off the auto join function so your phone doesn't join a fake network without you even knowing it. Jeff Rawson, NBC News, Cancun, Mexico.
Wow. Makes me kind of just want to go right out and go back on vacation. So what can we do? Well, confirm that name of the Wi-Fi and the network if you're unsure. Usually it's posted near the check-in place at hotels or up near the cashier, maybe at Starbucks or whatever. And be very careful if Wi-Fi asks you to download any software or enter personal information. For me, as somebody who travels quite a bit, the worst that I ever see is it might ask for my last name and room number at a hotel. If you're very concerned about it, we mentioned the use of using a VPN. No, you can get a VPN on your smartphone. Just a lot of times it's connected to your antivirus, anti-malware. Just type in VPN in Google Play, Apple iStore, and do user research. You may want to stick to that. Or stick to using a data plan. Stay on your data carrier instead of using the Wi-Fi. And if you're doing a lot of work or maybe with your laptop, sometimes even internationally, get a hotspot. Little hotspot from your carrier, and then that's, again, strictly data. Some other areas you want to think about, and think about it in terms of like when you go to the airport or go to Starbucks, try and sit with your back against the wall. One of the things I hate about airports is where's all the work areas? Right down the center aisles, right where people can see and walk around both sides of you. It just bothers me. Sit with your back against the wall or where nobody else can sit behind you. Be aware of your surroundings, okay? Want to be careful with things, and never give out your personal information while you're in public. Limit what you can see. Do you have a screen protector? I have both the screen protector, but I also make the screen kind of really dark, so unless I'm looking straight at it, you can't see it. And, we talk about leaving devices unattended or connected to unknown devices. You want to be very, very careful. We mentioned shoulder surfing, and you know what? Flying on planes, it's amazing to see some of the people work, and I applaud them for that. But anybody who sits within 2 to 3 rows around that individual can see every single thing that they're working on for the entire flight. We want to be very, very careful about what we're displaying and showing to others in terms of shoulder surfing. Other areas to be concerned with, think about social media and all of what we're social media. We want to be very, very careful with what we're clicking on, the links and the videos. And I love to live my life vicariously. I live through other people. I want to see the dancing cats, and I want to see what people are doing on their vacation. But you want to be very, very careful about clicking on those links. Limit what you can share. Tell me about your vacation, but do it after you do it. I've actually got a friend of mine who shared out spending Christmas with the grandkids in Vermont. A criminal saw that and broke into their house, stole their car, and actually went in and out of the house for several days because they had posted they were not going to be there. Post on it, but do it afterwards. And never post pictures of your desk or ID badge. And if you reviewed your privacy settings, again, I mentioned that at the beginning, how we need to do that. There's been a lot of great updates just even recently on LinkedIn and new privacy settings. That's good, but they don't actually turn them on. That's for you to go out and actually set those. Make sure you're setting them where you are. We mentioned the fake path profiles. And yeah, I'm not getting any software off of Facebook. I'm going back again to Google Play. And we've talked about the 2-factor accounts. What about our mobile devices? Do you have a PIN or a password on it? Or do you just swipe up? And here's where I pick on the Android users. I always draw the little house pattern with the little stars. Really? Pick it up and look at the glass. You can see what that pattern is. You want to be very careful with that. Keep your devices and your apps updated. You want to make sure that they're constantly updated. I love talking to Apple people, and you look at their system gear, and it's got 22. Those are different updates that you need to be installing, or their Apple iStore. I always struggle with avoid storing personal information. I live on the road. That is my life. But you know what? I can absolutely find my device if I lose it, and I can wipe it. We want to be very careful about that. Some other things, do we wipe them back or take them back to factory resets before turning them in? Or do you go, here you go Verizon, here you go AT&T, here's my entire life for you to have before as you exchange out phones? You want to be careful about sending out personal information via text message. No, text message is not encrypted. If you're concerned about that, you want to think about an end-to-end messaging app, maybe iMessage, another one that is fully encrypted. What about those apps? I've mentioned sticking to the Google Play and Apple Down Store a number of times. We want to be very, very careful where we're getting our apps. And really that privacy. Have you ever looked at it? Can you explain to me why my flashlight app needs access to my contact list? That's a scary thing. Think about what we're downloading. Check those permissions on our apps. And a couple of ways to do that, you need to also check them on your kids. Okay, if you have children under the age of 13, a lot of the games and stuff that they want to play have location tracking. That's one of the permissions that they want to do. Understand, under the age of 13, that's illegal. They cannot do that. Are we checking those? We talked about updating our apps and keeping them current. And again, not all apps are encrypted end to end. Well, we made it through our day. We've been going for a while. What is our goal? Well, we really want to think about, will I think and behave differently from now on? And am I as secure as we can be? And as we wrap up, our keys to success. One, remember, security is everybody's responsibility. We want to secure all of our devices, our phone, our Internet of Things, our workstation, make sure they're all secured. Remember, it's not just about the electronic data, it's also about the paper. How are we handling it? How are we disposing of it? Think before you click. Read our emails very closely. Watch out for those phishing attacks. We want to be careful with what we do and share on social media, and use unique, long, and strong passwords and two-factor authentication. We're going to be very careful in public. We're not going to let our guard down, especially when we use free Wi-Fi. If we see something, we're going to say something, we're going to do it immediately. Report all incidences and suspicious activities immediately. Be on the lookout, practice our safe browsing. We're going to stay current, patching our devices and our software. And finally, take action and freeze our accounts. With that, guys, thank you very, very much for your time, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.